Hey everyone, we have an episode of Creative Conversations today, and I'm really excited for you to meet John Reed. We're going to talk all about the concept of how brands are sticky. And I want to start by way of introducing John. John is, as I said in the lead into this episode, one of my favorite people on the planet. And I think you're going to see why in this video, no pressure, John, but he is the founder of Rain BDM, which is a consultancy that helps lawyers build outstanding client relationships. He and his team train law firms who need marketing services and support, and they provide help with one-time projects to outsourcing marketing. He's a former practicing lawyer, and John is basically also kind of awesome. He is, John, one of my favorite things about you is this whole leader dogs thing.
Yes.
Like, because
so
I'm
close
obsessed.
to my heart.
You are a member of the board of trustees for Leader Dogs for the Blind. You are a Myers-Briggs types indicator. You are freaking hilarious. And you're one, and seriously, and I just, every time I talk to you, it is such a pleasure. And I knew when we started this series, I was like, I got to get John on here because not only are you an incredible marketer, you're just really fun to be around. And I think the audience would enjoy that. So welcome, John.
And nobody else was available. So here I am.
And you were free. You were available. You were free.
Tuesday, noon. I can do this. Yeah, fine.
Great. Yeah, he's there. So, John, can we start just with how did you get in? Okay, because for our audience, and our audience isn't necessarily lawyers, although there may be some who are watching. Nobody really thinks we're like legal marketing. Are those like the 1-800 call Sam ads? Like, tell us a little bit about the field of legal marketing and then why you decided to start your own business in it.
Yeah, so the boring technical background is until 1980, there really wasn't legal marketing. The best that you could do would be to, put a classified ad with the name of your firm and a phone number and attorneys at law or something like that. It was very, very limited.
Was that regulated? You mean you couldn't?
It was regulated, rules of ethics, etc. And then somebody took a case up to the Supreme Court, and free speech, commercial speech, and all that stuff. And that I think a lot of people attribute 1980-ish as the birth of the legal marketing. And now we're shrink wrapping buses and all kinds of stuff. So so why did I get into it? I had this very strange career. And I often joke that it's like a Seurat painting, right?
Wow.
But if you look at it right here, it doesn't make any sense. But if you step back, it's like, oh, the dots, they all come together.
Yeah.
So, I have an undergraduate business degree. I was in advertising. Then I went to law school, practiced, met my wife at the firm, which is great. But the practice wasn't for me for various reasons. I have complete and utter respect for attorneys of all kinds. It just wasn't my thing. And then I had a little side jaunt into legal recruiting for a while. And then I worked for 11 years with a big legal publisher, Thomson Reuters now. And then I said, you know what? I kind of want to do this consulting thing. And I've got this marketing background. So I went to work for another company for a short period of time. Wasn't a good fit. But rather than go back to sales quotas, I said, you know what? Let me do this. And so jumped out on my own. That was 11 years ago.
And okay, wait, John, how did you start? Were you like on Craigslist looking for gigs? Like what was your first strategy?
So to go back a little bit of a step, with this company called Thomson Reuters, I started out as a up and down the street sales rep, selling anything you would buy. Then I moved up, advanced. At one point, I managed all the salespeople in Michigan, which was great. And then, believe it or not, I actually left for a year to go into legal marketing consulting. And I spent a year designing my logo. And that's about all I did in that year. I had beautiful collateral and wonderful plans, but I
The
prepared to launch.
logo was phenomenal.
You haven't seen it. It's a different company. It's not the same
But I
thing.
believe
So,
if you spent a year on it.
that logo. Oh yeah. I don't want to bring it out because it makes people cry. It's so beautiful. But yeah. So great year for my marriage. So we look fondly upon that year.
Was your wife like, when are you getting a job?
There might have been a little of that. Yeah. But fortunately, Thomson Reuters called me back and said, hey, we're doing something interesting. We're starting a new group aimed at the largest law firms in the country that tend to drive a lot of the innovation at least in that company and what they were doing. So I went from, dealing with smaller accounts to touching the largest law firms in Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. And that was my legal business graduate school, because I was interacting with CEOs and chief technology officers and muckety mucks and higher ups, and learning the business of law more than anything else, and had a great time. And I could not be where I am now had I not gone back for that second stint.
Wow.
So beautiful logos aside,
yeah.
I wasn't done yet. I wasn't fully baked. And so I attribute, you asked, what started all this. The other thing too, I have an unscientific survey that what your parents do affects what you do.
Okay.
And my father was a realtor, owned his own real estate offices. And so he was at every, sport, every athletic game I played in, every, after school activity or whatever, where there was something to present or show. He may have worked into the night, but so you kind of grow up and say, okay, that's normal. And so when you're stuck in a 9 to 5,
Yeah. John, I just have to say, that's really interesting you mentioned that, because my parents were both full-time employees, but the entire family behind them was a family of entrepreneurs. My grandmother owned a dress shop. Her sister owned a competing dress shop down the street. They were selling like groceries and stuff like that. My uncle was like the #1 light bulb salesman in Canada. Like all these entrepreneurs. And I knew from a young age, I said, one day I'll have my own business, because I felt it was like in the blood. That's so interesting.
Yeah, no, I think there's a nature nurture kind of thing there, right? Well, the funny thing is, so I went to college proudly. I went to a college called Babson College in outside Boston, and it is now highly regarded as the #1 entrepreneurial studies school in the country. So if you want to be an entrepreneur, you go there. They've got a student chamber of commerce. It's really quite a thing. And it had somewhat of that reputation back then. I took a whopping, 0 entrepreneurship classes when I was there, because I was really paying attention to where I was going. So, but it all worked out. So yeah. And I think, and maybe you'll agree with this too, and I don't mean to disparage anybody that's working for anybody else, but my worst day as my own boss is better than my best day working for somebody else. So
that's, yeah, for a lot, I think for a lot of us, it can feel that way, for sure. So John, you have this podcast called Sticky Lawyers, and you have this concept around stickiness. And so tell us a little bit about Sticky Lawyers, and then what do you mean by like sticky brands? What is that about?
Yeah, it's actually a term that it's more of a sales term, believe it or not. That if you have multiple product lines in with a client, or you've got multiple services you're offering, even if one isn't a good fit, you're still sticky. It's very difficult for that customer, that client to, jettison you in favor of another another vendor, whoever it might be. And so when I was at West, that was where I picked that up, the idea that we could
Okay.
have different divisions of the company involved with the law firm client. But it evolved in my head to be more than that. And so I think of its stickiness starting with the person, and then that's how the law firm might become sticky. But the idea is this: if I'm so ingrained with you as my client, that I know so much about you, that I'm, if you want to use the cliche, your trusted advisor, it's very hard for you to say, well, I'm going to go shop for another attorney. The level of trust is so high, the rapport, the reliance, all that stuff, it's just so concrete, that not only is it guaranteeing loyalty and job security, but it also is probably worth a premium, or at least, year over year increases or something like that, that if I was being price shopped against somebody else, that may not happen. And here's what I think is the real key, particularly for lawyers, is stickiness can be equated to professional satisfaction. So only because this is the world I live in, lawyers go to law school to provide that service, to provide that expertise, sage legal counsel.
Right.
And we want clients to take our counsel and become successful with it. So if I've got that level of trust and confidence and stickiness with the client, and they value what I'm providing, then I'm happy as a clam, right? Because I'm getting good information from them so that I can give them good counsel, and it's cycling that way. And so I'm better off. So, whether you call it trusted advisor or stickiness or all that, I think it's all part of the same ball of wax.
But I really like that, because anyone who's running a service-based business, whether it's in the legal profession or otherwise, that really is kind of the key to having repeat business or becoming referable, is that people implicitly trust you because you've built trust, you've done what you said you're going to do, you have not dropped the ball on them repeatedly, you've shown up, you're helping get them results. That's really, that's quite powerful. And it's funny because sometimes that can sound, sometimes the hardest things to master are the simplest things to understand. It's like, yeah, that makes sense, but people don't do it. And because people don't do it, they wonder, why can't I find more clients, or why am I losing clients? And I think that you touched on it briefly, but this idea of professionalism within your work and really showing up in that way for the client is such a game changer. And it's what many people don't do. What do you think, actually? Is it different in the legal world?
There are opportunities to be that ingrained, whether you're selling widgets or you're dispensing legal advice. It's funny. So I was in advertising. I have a marketing degree undergrad. I worked at an ad agency in my first job out of college. And I remember watching the championship Final Four game as well as the Super Bowl with my colleagues. And we would all go and get drinks and go to the bathroom during the games because we wanted to see the ads. So I think in terms of ads, and there's a series, and boy, talk about a memorable brand. I have no idea who the company is. It's a financial services company, but they have the ads where this guy is up crying at the wedding and you think he's the dad, and he's not. He's the financial advisor. He's sticky, right? He's so entrenched with that family, that it is very personal and whatever else. So
that's super cool.
It can be everywhere, right? We hear these legendary stories coming out of Nordstrom's, about people returning a set of tires to Nordstrom's when they didn't buy them someplace. The tire story. So it can happen in retail. It can happen in product. It can happen in service, professional services, consumer services, whatever. It can happen anywhere. It's just, let me give it to you a different way. And this is so fascinating. There's a book, The Experience Economy. I've got it over my shoulder.
Okay.
And it's where I was first introduced to the concept of customer surprise, right?
Mm,
So you're on a Delta flight, Laura, flying
yes.
wherever you fly, and drink cart comes down the aisle, and you'd really like a cola. And you know that you're on a Delta flight and you're going to get Coke because Delta and Coke are based in Atlanta. Never going to
Mm,
change. Now, later on, when they send you the customer satisfaction survey, flight was on time, left early, it was great. Flight attendants were great. I got my soda, it was cold, the whole thing. Your customer satisfaction is 100%, but your customer sacrifice is not zero. You really wanted a Pepsi, but you couldn't get it on that flight. So
right.
what happens if you're a frequent flyer and you take that route back and forth between whatever city you're commuting, and the flight attendant gets to know you, and one day she goes and pulls a Pepsi out of her bag and gives it to you in row 3B.
You lose it.
Your customer surprise is off the
Yes.
charts.
Yeah.
And that's, I think it's all part of the same thing. Do what the customer client wants, but doesn't expect. And sometimes they even don't know what they want, and you're going to let them know what they want. I think Steve Jobs is a perfect example of that. I think that's where the special secret sauce is. It's in that area.
That's super cool. You know, this reminds me, this is a little bit of a side tangential thing. We should do a separate series on this, but of the gifting with clients. Because one of the things that I've learned in running my own business is the power of giving gifts and figuring out what the client would really love without them telling you. Just because you've gotten to know them, you've built the relationship. And then when something shows up, they're like, oh my God, like how did they figure this out? That's something I've really only come into in the last few months. And it's just been like, holy cow, what a game changer. I don't know, that it reminds me of that as we're talking.
Yeah, and I think, and it's an honest mistake, but a mistake nonetheless. Companies say, I'm going to give a gift, and they buy it in quantity, and it's got the logo on the side,
right.
and they ship it out, and they can't understand why people aren't thrilled that they got a gift with their logo on the side, you know. So it's funny you mentioned that. I think handwritten notes are completely underrated.
Yes.
Gift aside, write somebody a handwritten note.
Yeah. Huge.
You know, even a handwritten envelope these days is a rarity. I think the other tried and true, a book.
I have received books from my own service providers, and I love that. That's a great one, John.
Yeah, it's I don't know what it is. It's certainly the idea of I listen to you. So I have a person I had breakfast with a few months ago, and we were talking, and she said she loves historical fiction. And I had finished a book about Paul Cravath. There's a big law firm, Cravath Brothers, Cravath Swain now. And it was that plus Tesla plus Westinghouse and the opera. And it was this wonderful story. So, hey, Amazon, it gets delivered the next day. So, you know, and that's, by the way, she's not a writer of historical fiction. She does something completely different.
Right.
And in an off remark, she says something, and I send this book. It's guaranteed to get a response, if nothing else. I mean, anybody who doesn't write you back after giving, you know, you give them a book is just rude.
Totally.
I know.
But
then you throw, you know, Amazon into this and getting it there, and it's a surprise. It's a customer surprise. So.
Okay, so John, this is brilliant. I want to ask you, for someone who's their wheels are spinning right now, they're like, okay, I like this idea of delighting and surprising and building trust, being the trusted advisor. Like, and they're like, God, that sounds like overwhelming and complex. where do we start? What would be the easiest next action or simplest action they could take in the right direction?
Yeah, I'll put this in my context. It's not gonna work for Wrigley's chewing gum, right? That's an impulse buy, but patience. Much of the sales culture in the US is pouncing. It's, I'm going to ask you self-serving questions. And if you say yes to my self-serving questions, then I'm going to try and convince you that the product or service I'm trying to sell you is a match because you've just agreed with all the questions, self-serving, that I've asked you. Okay. And it's a myopic, very tunnel vision type of approach. They call it consultative. It's not. It's self-serving. I think, and I give people this homework assignment, go and have 2 really great conversations with somebody at your next networking event. It's not a numbers game. He who comes back with the most number of business cards does not win. Okay.
Yeah.
Go and have 2 really good conversations and make sure everything that comes out of your mouth ends in a question mark.
Oh,
and then
I love it.
And
Yeah,
then when you're in your car or on your bike or walking home or whatever, stop, reflect on those conversations individually, and then ask yourself, what can I do with that? And if they said, I almost couldn't get to this event tonight because I couldn't find a sitter for my children, or I found the speaker riveting to you, or something else that you hear that has nothing to do with their business, if you ask what they even do, what can you do with that? And sometimes the answer isn't giving. Sometimes the answer is asking. So maybe it's, I'd like to learn more about what you were talking about. Can we find some time to continue that conversation? I'm going on a trip to that national park. I'd love to find out what your greatest hits were or something like that. So what are you doing to have that next interaction? Okay, my mantra, business development is a series of conversations. It never ends. So you have to think about your next conversation, and the best time to do it is when you're having the current conversation. So what is not, okay, what's my follow-up? But what can I do with what I've learned to keep it going? And by asking more questions, I'm getting somebody to talk about their favorite subjects themselves. I'm learning, and I'm able to do something with that. And in time, I'm gonna figure out if this is a sales project prospect or referral opportunity or whatever it is. But at that very first interaction, be patient and just ask questions and learn.
I love that. It's so brilliant because you're absolutely right. As I hear you talking about this, people go in with an agenda, and the agenda is, I need to get X number of clients. I need to get X number of business cards. And this feels what I hear, the way I hear you speaking right now feels natural. It feels like you're taking a genuine interest in another individual because you're finding things that may be points of relatability or comparison that you can follow up on. And it's not forcing a particular outcome with them. It doesn't have to be a new client. It could just be someone in your network that whatever, maybe they're a referral partner. Maybe they speak at your upcoming event. Maybe you just share a babysitter. I like that.
I loathe, detest, abhor, there's others, the elevator pitch. Cannot stand the elevator pitch. And it's like clockwork. You can be watching LinkedIn and it's like, oh yeah, somebody's up. Yeah, you got to develop your elevator pitch. Has it been 12 months already? Okay, all right. It's everybody's telling you it had an elevator pitch. Can you imagine anything worse than being in an elevator, stuck, and there's some guy trying to sell you a used car or copier, toner, or whatever it is? And it goes back to what I just said before. Every elevator pitch ends in a period. It doesn't end in a question. And if it does, most of the time it's self-serving to get me into that consultative role.
So let's talk about this, because I also hate the elevator pitch. And when I work with clients, the first thing we say is, get rid of it. We're not doing it. You're going to have a conversation with someone.
Mm-hmm.
When someone asks you, okay, no, here's one thing though that can kind of freak people out. And I want to bring this up, especially in the context of professions that people are suspicious of, like marketers or attorneys. And people are like,
really?
Oh,
really?
God,
Lawyers, attorneys? Really? Really?
Wow. John, I have to say, when I was growing up, my dad, many people know this, my dad is from Egypt. And so he has an accent, and the way I learned to say lawyer as a kid was liar. And so I was like, oh, liars? And people would be like, what are you talking about? Like, liars. And I realized my dad was making a very funny joke that I never realized till I was much older. But, I mean, we know. So when someone's in a networking event and they have to introduce themselves, and there may be, how do you introduce yourself? How do you recommend do we say I'm a lawyer? Do we say, oh, well, I help people with X get resolutions on Y? Like, what do you recommend?
Yeah, I recommend
you gotta say something about yourself.
Yeah, I recommend an opener. And starts with 2 words: I help.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next piece of that is who you help, who your target audience is, customers, clients, whatever, to do something, right? So what is it that you help them achieve? And then the last part, so that they can have that benefit. That's it. It's a Mad Lib. Okay. It's just that easy.
Love it.
And what it avoids is all of the stigmas. So again, back to my world, right?
Yeah.
Chances are 1 out of every 2 people who's had an experience with a lawyer had a bad experience with a lawyer.
Right.
Either because it was litigation and somebody lost. And again, I said at least 1, you can say a divorce, right?
Right.
2.
Yeah.
So you could be a patent attorney, which is so far away from being a divorce lawyer. But if you say I'm a lawyer, you've now conjured up all
those bad memories, all the images, all the ads that we hate.
The schmutz. The schmutz comes back. When you say I help, first off, it's not about you any longer. It's you helping somebody else. Then you get to paint the picture of who you help. I help inventors. Let's use this patent alert thing. I help people with great ideas make money from those ideas so that they can start their own companies on the fly, right? And here's the beautiful thing. We get to do what our mothers told us not to do, right? Your mom and my mom taught us it was rude to answer a question with a question, but we're going to do it anyway. So somebody says, what do you do? I say, I help garage inventors take their ideas from paper to the marketplace so they can have the lifestyle they want. And they may say, well, how do you do that? And that's your objective, by the way, is to elicit some sort of, tell me more. How do you do that?
Yeah.
Let me ask you, does anybody in your family own a patent? Has anybody in your family ever trademarked or copyrighted something? Okay. Here's the beauty. The answer doesn't matter. Okay. Right. If they say, yeah, my cousin, owns this patent and he's got a whole company, right, then you know exactly what I do. And now we've got the connection, right? If they say, I have no idea, well, those are my stock and trade, patents and trademarks and copyrights. And now you kind of know this person may or may not be worth talking to if you're in that pouncy sales mode, which you shouldn't be, but you're qualifying and it's harmless. And plus, if they say, yeah, my cousin started a company, great, let's go down that. What's the business? What does he do? How long has he been doing that? Have you ever worked for him? it goes in
Right.
so many different ways, and it takes it out of that very linear, as I say, tunnel vision sales, right?
John, I know you're going to love me saying this. You are so brilliant. I mean, truly, you are just such a brilliant
You're
mind.
very kind. You're very
I,
kind.
again, we've worked together. I don't lie. You've known me for long enough to know that I tell people like it is.
Yeah.
So I really mean that. I just think you have such a brilliant mind.
Well, you're very nice. You're very nice. I wanted to say this. I forgot about it earlier, but I think
What?
it's important. One of the things that's happened with branding, both people and institutions,
Mm-hmm.
is I think we are now expecting people to be more conscious of our communities. So we're seeing an increase in corporate social responsibility as an institutional brand enhancement, right? And not official sponsor of, but
Yeah.
something a little more selfless and altruistic. But I think we're also seeing that on the individual level too. And it's an extension, really. I mean, it's that same customer surprise. Well, I'm going to surprise you by showing you that I have a heart,
Yeah.
that I have an interest, and I pursue my passion. And it also says, and I don't take my work so seriously that I can't find the time to be helpful to others outside of that too. So I think that's a new, it's becoming a new litmus test. I think we're expecting it
Mm-hmm.
more, and we should.
I love it. So we before we started recording, you basically were telling me how your consulting business now has the agency's going gangbusters this year. And it's when we look at people who are kind of quote unquote on the top or doing really well, it can be very hard for anyone to imagine a time when they ever failed, when they ever screwed anything up, when they weren't such a big fish. And one part of this series that I really want our guests to talk about is a time when maybe you kind of screwed something up. Like, can you think about a time? Because God knows I can. Can you think about a time in your business where it was like, oh man, I really messed this up. I learned from this mistake I made.
Do you want it from today, yesterday, or the day before that? Happy to bring up whatever you want to talk about. No, every day. A mistake, a learning lesson happens every day.
Yeah.
And it goes from something you could have done better to just an egregious mistake. Look, in terms of career advancement, I think the year spent, designing a logo was a real eye opener for that.
Yeah.
I think my biggest mistakes have happened when I've assumed something.
Oh yeah, totally. Right?
Yeah. I've assumed, especially early on in business, you're chasing down anything that will pay a bill, and you turn off your spidey sense and you hide your gut sense, and it's like, yeah. And then when it blows up, hopefully not so badly, you're like, yep, should have known
You
that.
knew.
So that's the biggest lesson I would tell anybody is it's never too early to trust your gut, to trust your sense. If it's not right,
I love it.
put the brakes on.
That reminds me of a story. So when I first started consulting, I was doing marketing consulting back in 2013. And I had a friend refer me to a prospective client. And I was living in San Francisco. I had to drive down to Mountain View, which is about an hour, to go meet with this person. But it was a referral. So I thought, oh, this is going to be good. So I get into and it's startups, it's like startup land. And so I get into this like really weird office, but that's kind of normal. There's like IKEA desks set up and like there's no
Foosball
lighting.
tables, bean bags.
Yeah. No, they didn't even have that stuff. Like, it was like bare bones, like they had just moved into the office. It was it almost looked like an overnight operation, but they were clearly like, they just had a seed round of funding. And so anyway, I meet with the marketing guy and we have a good chat, and he's like talking a lot about strategy. And he's like, great, well, when can you start? And this was for a consulting role. And we had not talked about price at all. And I was like, oh, this is a little strange. And I said, well, let's figure out, how many hours do you need and the pricing that works, and, discuss that. And then, so I was going to go and work on a proposal for him when I got back home. In the meantime, he sent me a calendar invite for a kickoff meeting in 2 days. And I'm looking at it. I said, well, hang on a second. I can't spend a whole day with you in a kickoff meeting before we have determined the price, the scope of the work. I knew that much. That much I knew. I didn't know a whole lot more than that. And so I declined to work with him. Actually, no, what happened was then I messaged the CEO. It was like a 5-person team. And I said, hey, we need to have a discussion about the pricing. And I had met with the CEO, and the marketing guy just got so upset with me for reaching out to the CEO and going over him after he'd ignored my emails about pricing. So I don't know that I handled that the best, but obviously we didn't work together. And then I contacted that friend of mine and I said, who is this guy? Like, what was that about? And she said, Laura, I'm so sorry. I have learned that he does not pay his contractors. And I'm like, okay, I'm glad I didn't work with him. And also, oh my God, like but when you're hungry, you'll jump for things, right?
Absolutely.
Without realizing people are not, their intentions are not always as pure as your own, or, they just think they can get something from you. You got to be very careful, very careful. And I never screwed up a contract since then.
I was waiting for you to say the company was Theranos,
The CEO, Elizabeth Holmes. Yeah, no, it wasn't. Although I'm sure it's not in business because most of those go under. But yeah,
no, it's a trust your gut. It's never assume. And since I'm recommending books, and I have to show you this because these pictures, I don't know these people. They just came with the frames. So this is the book. It's called Getting Naked by Patrick Lencioni, he's a very well-known business writer, and it's not what you think. But it is the story of a very successful, it's written in parable style, very successful consultant who, her best sales tool is a blank pad of paper and a pencil. And it's just asking questions. And even though that prospective client's going, well, that's stupid, you could have looked that up on the website, she just keeps going. She keeps asking questions and builds on it, and builds on it, and builds on it. And so there's never that risk of assuming something, right?
I love that.
And I think, in your situation, you got to ask those questions of referral sources, and you've got to ask those questions of prospects, and you stuck to your guns, and think of how awful it would have been had you said, great, on trust, I'll be there for in 2 days for the meeting.
Right. Well, yeah. And it was, it wasn't my best client relationship. It wasn't the best way to manage the client relationship or prospective client relationship. I think that was a failure on my part, but never working for free has been something that I've always known. We can't do things without a contract. John, this was so much fun. Thank you for doing this with me.
It's always fun with you. We have fun.
We have a great time.
This is just us chatting. This isn't even a thing.
I know, it really is us chatting. So for those of you who are watching this, if you have comments for me or John, pop them in the comments. We will see them. Tag us. We'll respond.
Down there. Pop them in the comments. Yeah. Down there.
John, thank you so much. Do you have any final words? Anything else you want to say? Where can people learn more about you?
Couple places. Visit our very cool website, rainbdm.com. And there's this really cool slider at the top. Laura's seen it. It's a stress reliever. It's awesome. and you'll get a flavor for what we do at our business. I would encourage lawyers and non-lawyers alike to check out Sticky Lawyers, the podcast.
Yes.
And just quick plug on that. All it is interesting stories from interesting lawyers. You don't have to practice law to really understand it or get it. It's just a lot of fun. So
that is the truth. And as someone who is not an attorney and not involved in the legal profession, I really love your show. I think it is super interesting. You've had on, can you just talk?
No, I'm going to put you on the spot. Who's been your favorite guest so far?
You know, I always go back to this woman. I really liked the sports attorney. I just think her story was so interesting. And you know, it's like you hear about people working in professions that I guess for me, I didn't even know existed. I mean, you've had on an equine attorney, right? You've had on, is his name Mo? Lilienthal?
Yep.
Mo, are you watching this?
Mo Lilienthal. Yeah, Mo will probably watch this in its entirety. He is a super guy.
Yes. And yeah, I just think it's super fascinating. I mean, for people who are interested in jobs and in worlds that are different from your own, go check out Sticky Lawyers. It is awesome. John Reed of Rain BDM, thank you so much for joining us today on this creative conversation.